A dad and his 16-month-old son vanished from their mountain campsite in 2013 without leaving a single clue behind. 11 years later, a climber stumbled across something that seemed to break the very laws of physics. What she found on that frozen summit would stay with her forever. Scattered in the snow were jars of baby food, objects that should have been utterly impossible to find in such a place. It all began in September 2013, when David Chen decided to take his baby boy Tyler on what would become their final trip together. David was only 28, but he had already spent over a year raising his son alone after Tyler's mother walked away when the child was just 3 months old. By trade, David was a software engineer in Denver, often tied to his desk for long hours. He felt the weight of guilt that came with time spent away from his son, so he organized this camping trip to be fully present as a father. He wanted Tyler's very first real adventure outdoors to be special. He picked a site in Rocky Mountain National Park at a safe, moderate elevation, ideal for a toddler. David planned everything carefully. The forecast was clear, the spot offered quick access to help if needed, and the location had a reputation as a family-friendly area. His packing was meticulous. Extra clothes for Tyler, more than enough jars of baby food, diapers, a portable crib, and Tyler's beloved stuffed elephant. He even carried a satellite phone for emergencies and made sure his co-workers knew exactly where he'd be and when he'd return. Tyler, even as a toddler, had a curious spirit. At just 16 months, he was learning to walk, fascinated by everything: pine cones, smooth stones, the dance of shadows across the ground. David cherished watching his son discover the world. That Friday evening, they pitched their tent beside a stream. Tyler laughed as his father set up camp, playfully snatching tent stakes and crawling under the fabric. They shared a simple dinner cooked on a small stove, Tyler happily eating sweet potato baby food while David told stories about mountains and wildlife. When night came, David settled Tyler into the crib inside the tent. The boy drifted to sleep quickly, soothed by the gentle rush of water outside and the comfort of his father close by. David lingered outside for a while, soaking in the quiet peace of the mountains, making plans for the day ahead. But sometime in the night, something went terribly wrong. On Saturday morning, new campers arrived at a nearby site. They noticed the silence. No baby crying, no sound of a father preparing breakfast. Their cheerful greetings received no reply. Worried, they walked over. Everything looked normal, except David and Tyler were nowhere to be found. The tent was zipped shut. All of their belongings were exactly where David had left them. Tyler's crib was empty but untouched, with no sign of a struggle. David's wallet, car keys, and satellite phone were still inside. Even Tyler's stuffed elephant sat in the crib, making it unthinkable that David had taken his son willingly. The campers quickly contacted the park rangers, who arrived within 20 minutes. What they found made no sense at all. There were no footprints. The soft earth around the tent showed only the tracks from when father and son had set up camp. No adult prints, no baby prints. Nothing to suggest they had walked away in the night. The search began at once and grew enormous in scale. Teams with helicopters, search dogs, and specialized rescue equipment scoured the area. The terrain was difficult but hardly impossible for an experienced hiker like David. If they had simply gotten lost, signs should have been found. Volunteers combed every trail and creek bed, exploring every route David might have taken with a toddler. Helicopter thermal scans revealed no human heat signatures. Ground teams found no discarded clothing, no lost gear, no hint that a father and child had passed through. The search widened to more than 50 square miles of wilderness. Veteran trackers, people capable of following week-old animal trails across bare rock, found absolutely nothing pointing to where David and Tyler had gone. As days turned into weeks, investigators exhausted every lead. Had David staged their disappearance? The evidence said no. His bank accounts were untouched. Rent on his apartment was coming due, and he had an appointment already scheduled with Tyler's pediatrician. Could someone have abducted them? The idea seemed impossible. To take a man and a toddler without leaving a trace would have required immense planning and resources. No strange vehicles had been reported. The nearest road was miles away, across rough terrain. Had they simply wandered off? Experts doubted it. Even carrying his son, David could not have moved far enough to escape such a massive search. The mountains would have left evidence. Gear abandoned, clothing shed, or some sign of distress. The mystery gripped national media, but without answers, headlines soon moved on. David's employer kept his job open for months, waiting for his return. Tyler's daycare built a small memorial garden using his favorite toys. The official investigation dragged on for more than a year before the case was marked unresolved. The camp was cleared, David's car impounded, and their possessions locked away as evidence. Another father and child lost to the mountains, without explanation. Years passed. The case gathered dust. Sometimes hikers reported hearing the cry of a baby deep in the wilderness, but no lead ever panned out. The Chen family disappearance slipped into the cold files, all but forgotten. But the mountains don't forget. In August 2024, seasoned climber Sarah Williams set out on a difficult route about 15 miles from where David and Tyler had last camped. Sarah had been climbing these peaks for over 2 decades and knew every landmark and formation by heart. At 12,000 feet, crossing an exposed ledge of rock, she spotted something that stopped her cold. Half buried in the permanent snow were small glass jars. At first, she thought they must be leftover supplies from long-ago climbers. But as she approached, the truth left her stunned. They were baby food jars, the same kind you'd find in any supermarket. Yet here they sat, at an altitude where no infant could survive, and no one would ever carry baby food. Sarah bent down to study them more closely. What she discovered challenged everything she knew about the mountains and about time itself. The jars were warm to the touch. In a place where temperatures never rose above freezing, where the snow had lain for decades, the food inside was fresh. The lids showed no rust or decay. The labels were clean and bright, as though placed there yesterday. And that was not the most disturbing detail. The expiration dates printed on the jars were from the future, some months ahead, some years. One jar bore the date 2027, 3 years after the moment Sarah found it. She carefully photographed the jars, recorded their GPS location, and collected them for closer study. But when she reached base camp and examined them again, she uncovered something even more unsettling. The baby food was still warm in a way that was uncanny. Not too hot, not too cold, but at exactly the temperature a loving parent would want before feeding their child. Hours had passed since Sarah found the jars and carried them down the mountain, yet they still held that same perfect warmth. Shaken, she contacted park authorities at once. Rangers arrived quickly, and what they uncovered only deepened the mystery. Around the same spot where Sarah had found the jars, more objects were scattered in the snow. Objects that clearly belonged to a father and son. Tyler's missing stuffed elephant, intact and soft despite 11 years of brutal mountain weather. David's hiking boots, resting in the snow as if abandoned yesterday, untouched by wear or time. The most baffling find came in the form of a waterproof container, Inside was a set of photographs. Each image showed David and Tyler, captured at different ages in different parts of the mountains. But none were from that first camping trip. The photographs were dated after the disappearance. Some appeared to be taken only weeks later, others months, and some years after they had vanished. In each, David and Tyler looked alive, well, and strangely content. Tyler aged across the sequence, but slowly, as though time moved differently for them than it did for the rest of the world. The most recent photographs had been taken just days before Sarah's discovery. In them, Tyler looked about 5 or 6 years old, playing in the snow as David looked on, smiling. Their clothes were new, bright winter gear, untouched by wear. They looked exactly as they would have if they'd been living normal lives, except they were in a place where survival should have been impossible. One picture showed the two sitting side by side, sharing a meal. Tyler, now old enough to feed himself, was spooning baby food from a jar identical to those Sarah had found. David watched him with the calm, tender smile of a father who had all the time in the world. Taped to this last photo was a handwritten note, unmistakably in David's script. Time moves differently here, but love stays the same. Tyler is healthy and happy. We've found a place where winter protects us and food never spoils. Thank you for finding our gifts. They're proof that we're exactly where we need to be. The case was immediately reopened, but every new discovery raised more questions than answers. Forensic experts tested the jars. The food inside contained nutrients and ingredients that hadn't even been developed for commercial use yet. Recipes from the future. The jars weren't just preserved relics from 2013. They were impossibly ahead of their time. Metadata from the photographs confirmed they had been taken all across the Rocky Mountain Range, in locations where human survival without advanced gear was impossible. Yet David and Tyler appeared healthy, thriving, and equipped with nothing but normal clothing. Even stranger was the pristine state of everything recovered. Fabric that should have bleached or torn under the sun remained as bright as new. Metal showed no rust, no wear. Organic materials like stuffed toys and paper were untouched by rot. It was as though time itself had refused to touch these things. Investigators widened their search. Using ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging, they uncovered cache sites hidden across the mountains. Each contained more evidence, supplies, belongings, and photographs. Together, they told a story of how David and Tyler had not only survived but lived for 11 years in the wilderness. And then came the most astonishing revelation. They were not alone. Some caches held belongings from other families that had vanished from campgrounds throughout the Rockies over the past 30 years. These families, too, seemed to be caught in the same strange condition. Surviving where survival should be impossible, aging slowly, and maintaining connection across vast distances. The evidence painted a picture of a hidden community, families displaced from normal life, living by rules outside conventional reality. They had somehow learned to bend the mountain environment to protect and sustain themselves. Food stayed fresh. Fabric never wore. Children grew, but differently. David and Tyler, it seemed, had become part of this secret society. They shared supplies, knowledge, and companionship with others who had made the same leap from ordinary existence into something beyond comprehension. Most astonishing of all, the evidence suggested that this wasn't an accident. Families weren't simply swept away by anomalies. They were choosing to step into this other state, moments of deep love and trust acting as the doorway. The baby food jars weren't random flukes. They were deliberate offerings, placed where someone would eventually find them. David and Tyler seemed to be leaving proof, reminders to the outside world that love could create its own reality, one where families endured together no matter the conditions. The government classified the case at the highest levels. Every piece of evidence was seized and locked away. The cache sites were cordoned off and declared off-limits. Official reports offered only vague statements. Items of interest had been recovered, but the case remained unsolved. But the phenomenon refused to be buried. In the months after Sarah's discovery, climbers across the Rockies began reporting similar findings. Fresh, warm food in impossible places, photographs of families long thought missing, evidence of human life in places where life should not exist. Patterns emerged. It was as though these families were growing bolder, more intentional. Their evidence became more sophisticated, as if they wanted the world to understand their story and respect their choice. Some climbers even reported glimpses of the families themselves. Always brief, always peaceful. A father and child spotted at a distance, voices calling friendly greetings from unreachable ridges. When investigators followed up, they found signs confirming the encounters, but never the families. Only traces of lives lived well in places that should have been lethal. 11 years after David Chen and his son Tyler vanished into the mountains, their case still challenges everything we think we know about family, about the limits of nature, about the very fabric of reality. The baby food remains warm. The photographs still document a life unfolding against impossible odds. And somewhere in the heights of the Rocky Mountains, love continues to bend the rules of what is possible. Whether this represents the ultimate expression of parental devotion or something far stranger depends on what you choose to believe about the power of love to reshape the world around us. But one thing remains certain. In the vast wilderness of the mountains, some bonds are strong enough to transcend not just distance and time, but the very laws of nature itself. David wanted to give his son the perfect camping trip, and somehow he found a way to make that trip last forever. In a place where winter preserves all things precious, where food never spoils, and where a father's love can protect his child from any hardship, their adventure continues. The mountains keep their secrets, but sometimes those secrets are beautiful enough to change everything we think we know about what's possible when love refuses to accept limitations. The mountains keep their secrets, but sometimes those secrets are beautiful enough to change everything we think we know about what's possible when love refuses to accept limitations. The investigation took an unprecedented turn when federal authorities assembled a specialized task force to study what they codenamed the Chen phenomenon. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a theoretical physicist from MIT, was brought in to analyze the temporal anomalies surrounding the baby food discovery. What Dr. Rodriguez found challenged the fundamental principles of physics as we understand them. His analysis of the baby food jars revealed molecular structures that shouldn't exist in nature. The food wasn't just preserved. It was existing in a state of temporal suspension where decay, temperature change, and even the normal passage of time operated according to different rules. The containers showed evidence of what Dr. Rodriguez termed chronological displacement. They were simultaneously existing in multiple time periods. Carbon dating revealed organic compounds that registered as being from 2013, 2024, and several future dates that hadn't occurred yet. But the most disturbing discovery came when Dr. Rodriguez's team analyzed the photographs found with the baby food. The images contained metadata that recorded not just visual information, but precise measurements of atmospheric conditions, electromagnetic fields, and gravitational anomalies present when each photo was taken. The data revealed that David and Tyler weren't just surviving in impossible mountain conditions. They were existing in pockets of altered reality where the normal laws of physics didn't apply. Temperature, pressure, and even the passage of time fluctuated in ways that created livable environments within the harsh mountain wilderness. Dr. Rodriguez theorized that intense emotional bonds between family members could, under specific conditions, influence the quantum structure of local space-time. Love, he proposed, might be a force capable of creating what he called reality bubbles. Small areas where physical laws adapted to support the needs of those experiencing profound connection. The theory gained credibility when the task force discovered that similar phenomena had been occurring throughout human history. Ancient legends from mountain cultures around the world described families who walked between seasons, disappearing into the wilderness during harsh weather and emerging years later, unchanged by time. Archaeological evidence supported these stories. In the Himalayas, researchers found preserved campsites at impossible altitudes, containing artifacts that showed no aging despite centuries of exposure. The Andes yielded similar discoveries, family belongings preserved in ice caves, where the atmospheric conditions should have made preservation impossible. But the most significant breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez's team identified the specific conditions that triggered reality displacement. The phenomenon occurred when families experiencing intense bonding were exposed to unique combinations of electromagnetic fields, atmospheric pressure, and geological conditions found only in certain mountain environments. These convergence zones created windows where love could literally reshape reality. David and Tyler's campsite was located at the intersection of three major geological fault lines, creating electromagnetic conditions that, when combined with the emotional intensity of their father-son bonding, had opened a doorway into an altered state of existence. The task force mapped 17 similar convergence zones throughout the Rocky Mountain Range, each associated with mysterious family disappearances over the past century. Every zone showed the same characteristics: unique geological formations, specific electromagnetic signatures, and evidence of families who had vanished only to reappear in impossible circumstances years later. But studying the phenomenon proved dangerous. As the task force focused scientific attention on the convergence zones, they began to destabilize the delicate conditions that made reality displacement possible. Families who had been living peacefully in their altered states started experiencing disruptions. Their protective bubbles began to fluctuate, threatening to collapse and force them back into conventional reality. Dr. Rodriguez received communications from David Chen through a method that defied explanation. Messages would appear in the baby food caches, written in David's handwriting but on paper that showed no signs of aging. The messages pleaded with the research team to stop their investigation before it destroyed the sanctuary that displaced families had found. "Tyler is growing up happy and healthy here," one message read. "He's learning things about the world that school could never teach him. We have friends, other families who found their way to this place where love is stronger than winter. Please don't take this away from us. The messages revealed that displaced families had formed a community that existed across multiple convergence zones. They could travel between locations through methods that bypassed normal space and time, sharing resources and supporting each other in ways that created a parallel civilization within the mountain wilderness. Children born into this reality grew up with abilities that seemed miraculous to outside observers. They could predict weather changes days in advance, communicate with wildlife, and navigate terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. Most remarkably, they aged differently, developing wisdom and skills rapidly while maintaining the physical resilience needed for their challenging environment. Tyler, according to his father's messages, had become one of these extraordinary children. At what should have been 12 years old in conventional time, he possessed the outdoor skills of an experienced adult while maintaining the curiosity and joy of childhood. He served as a bridge between displaced families, helping newcomers adapt to their altered reality. The task force faced an impossible ethical dilemma. Their research was providing unprecedented insights into the nature of consciousness, love, and reality itself. But continuing their investigation threatened to destroy a functioning society where families had found happiness and fulfillment outside the constraints of conventional existence. The dilemma intensified when Dr. Rodriguez's own family became involved in the phenomenon. During a research expedition to one of the convergence zones, Dr. Rodriguez brought his wife and young daughter along, planning to keep them safely away from the investigation site. But electromagnetic readings at the location spiked unexpectedly, creating conditions similar to those present during the original displacements. For 6 hours, Dr. Rodriguez lost contact with his family. He could see them in the distance, but every attempt to reach them failed. They seemed to be experiencing the mountain environment differently than he was, walking on snow that supported their weight while his feet sank through, staying warm in temperatures that chilled him to the bone. When contact was re-established, his wife and daughter had experienced what they described as the most perfect day of their lives. They had met other families living in the mountains, shared meals that satisfied hunger they didn't know they had, and experienced a sense of belonging and purpose that conventional life had never provided. His daughter, who had always struggled with anxiety and social difficulties, returned calm and confident. She spoke of friends who understood her completely and activities that challenged her mind and body in ways that regular school never had. She begged her father to let them return to the real mountain families. The incident forced Dr. Rodriguez to confront the possibility that displaced families weren't victims of a phenomenon. They were pioneers of a new way of existence that offered advantages conventional reality couldn't match. His wife began researching families who had chosen displacement, discovering accounts of marriages strengthened, children thriving, and elderly family members regaining vitality in the altered mountain environment. The displaced families weren't suffering. They were flourishing in ways that challenged assumptions about what constituted a good life. The task force's investigation revealed that reality displacement wasn't limited to mountain environments. Similar phenomena occurred in deep forests, remote islands, desert oases, and other locations where specific geological and electromagnetic conditions aligned with intense family bonding. Each environment created its own version of altered reality. Forest families learned to communicate with plant and animal communities. Island families developed abilities to predict and navigate ocean conditions. Desert families found ways to thrive in extreme heat while maintaining access to resources that shouldn't exist in arid environments. The displaced families weren't isolated from each other. They formed a global network that operated according to principles conventional science couldn't explain. Messages, resources, and even people could travel between displacement sites through methods that bypassed normal geographical limitations. Children raised in displacement often served as ambassadors between different communities. Chen had traveled to forest, desert, and island locations, learning from families who had adapted to different altered realities. His education included skills and knowledge that no conventional school could provide. Dr. Rodriguez's research revealed that displacement communities had developed their own culture, with traditions, celebrations, and social structures adapted to their unique circumstances. They created art, music, and literature that reflected their experience of reality as something flexible rather than fixed. Most remarkably, they had developed methods of healing that worked by adjusting local reality rather than treating symptoms. Illnesses that would be chronic in conventional reality could be resolved by changing the environmental conditions within reality bubbles. Aging slowed or even reversed when families experienced periods of intense connection and mutual support. The displaced families weren't rejecting conventional reality. They were demonstrating that reality itself was far more flexible than most people believed. Their existence proved that consciousness, love, and intention could influence the physical world in ways that opened up possibilities for human development and happiness that conventional life couldn't access. But their peaceful existence was threatened by the growing attention their communities were receiving. As word of the displacement phenomenon spread within scientific and government circles, different agencies began developing plans to study, control, or exploit the reality-altering abilities the families had developed. Some proposed relocating displaced families to research facilities where their abilities could be studied under controlled conditions. Others suggested using displacement technology for military applications, creating soldiers who could operate in impossible environments or access enemy locations through reality manipulation. Corporate interests saw potential for developing new forms of travel, communication, and resource extraction based on displacement principles. Chen's messages to Dr. Rodriguez became increasingly urgent. "They want to turn what we've found into a weapon," one message read. "But love can't be weaponized. If they try to force us back or capture our children, we'll go deeper into the reality streams where no one can follow." The displaced families began preparing for the possibility that they would need to sever contact with conventional reality entirely. They developed protocols for moving their communities into deeper levels of reality displacement, where outside interference would be impossible. Dr. Rodriguez realized that his research had put the families he'd grown to respect in terrible danger. The knowledge he'd gathered was being used to develop technologies and strategies that would destroy the very communities that had made the discoveries possible. He made a decision that ended his career, but preserved his integrity. Dr. Rodriguez destroyed all his research data, erased the locations of convergence zones from government databases, and published a paper declaring that his initial findings had been based on measurement errors and wishful thinking. He discredited his own work to protect the families who had trusted him with their secrets. The official task force was disbanded, its members reassigned to other projects. The baby food discovery was explained as an elaborate hoax, and the photographs were dismissed as sophisticated digital manipulations. The displaced families faded back into legend and rumor. But Dr. Rodriguez maintained secret contact with David Chen and other displaced families through methods that bypassed conventional communication systems. He learned that the communities had not only survived the threat of exposure, but had grown stronger and more sophisticated. They had developed new methods of reality manipulation that allowed them to exist in multiple probability streams simultaneously. Families could experience different versions of their lives, choosing the timeline that offered the most growth and happiness for their children. Tyler Chen, now existing as multiple versions of himself across different reality streams, had become a teacher and guide for newly displaced families. In some timelines, he was a young adult exploring advanced reality manipulation techniques. In others, he remained a child experiencing the wonder of discovering new abilities. All versions of him were connected by the love that had originally triggered his family's displacement. The displaced families had evolved beyond the need for physical locations or conventional resources. They existed in a state of pure relationship, where love and intention shaped reality directly. They had achieved what humanity had always dreamed of: freedom from the limitations of physical existence, while maintaining the connections that made life meaningful. 12 years after David Chen and Tyler vanished from their mountain campsite, their story continues in dimensions that conventional reality cannot access. The baby food still maintains its perfect temperature, serving as a bridge between worlds and a reminder that love can create its own physics. Whether their choice represents humanity's next evolutionary step or a beautiful retreat from the challenges of conventional existence depends on what you believe about the nature of reality and the power of family bonds to transform not just lives, but the very structure of existence itself. The mountains still hold their secrets, but now those secrets include the knowledge that reality is far more malleable than most people dare to imagine. Somewhere beyond the reach of governments and corporations, families continue to discover that love is not just an emotion, it's a fundamental force capable of reshaping the universe itself. The mountains still hold their secrets, but now those secrets include the knowledge that reality is far more malleable than most people dare to imagine. Somewhere beyond the reach of governments and corporations, families continue to discover that love is not just an emotion, it's a fundamental force capable of reshaping the universe itself. David wanted to give Tyler the perfect first camping trip, and in ways that conventional science cannot explain, he succeeded beyond anything he could have imagined. Their weekend adventure became eternal. Their father-son bond became a bridge between worlds, and their love became proof that some forces are stronger than physics itself. But the story doesn't end with warm baby food on frozen peaks or photographs that document impossible realities. It continues every time a parent holds their child a little tighter, every time a family chooses connection over convenience, every time love refuses to accept the limitations that the world tries to impose. The baby food jars still maintain their perfect temperature, serving as beacons for other families who might be ready to discover what lies beyond conventional existence. Tyler's laughter still echoes across probability streams, calling to children who dream of adventures that last forever. And somewhere in the space between what is and what could be, other families are making choices that will determine whether they remain bound by the rules of ordinary reality, or whether they're brave enough to follow love into territories where miracles become everyday occurrences. The mountains are listening. The question is, are you ready to hear what they're trying to tell you about the true power of family bonds to transcend every limitation that existence tries to place on love? Some adventures never really end. They just find new ways to continue.